welcome to Broken Entertainment. There's a lot of negative stuff going on today, so I kind of moved some video topics around, focused on something a little more positive. I wanted to talk about this movie on Netflix called The Sea Beast. It's an animated movie for kids. And I have two kids, so I've watched it. And it's got this trailer up on IMDb, which I'll show you parts of. It's like the world's worst trailer because it gives away the huge chunks of the movie. But that's kind of how Hollywood is these days. So the story of this movie is that Netflix wanted an animation studio. And they kind of had to build one from the ground up. So they went and got the guy who was the director for Moana and Big Hero 6. And we're basically like, here, build us a studio, please, and do whatever you want. So that's kind of what he's done. I've seen this movie several times now. I'll try to be as spoiler-free as I can in this. And, you know, it's got some under-the-surface stuff, and it's got a disappointing Act 3, I think. But it was also kind of refreshing, because, you know, you're trying to find something to watch that's been made in the last 10 years that isn't total agenda-driven nonsense, and not always the easiest task. But let me go ahead and play part of the clip here.
And no ship was safe on the sea. But those days are over. Today, valiant warriors battle the beasts.
So, the first thing I'm immediately impressed by this movie, the special effects the animation looks fantastic. I mean, genuinely, just truly great special effects. Sorry, I keep saying special effects, animation. On par with, and I think in many places actually superior to anything Disney's putting out right now. I think Disney has been kind of stuck in this post-Moana rut where they have made a certain style of animation and they haven't really advanced it a whole lot since they made it. And I think this kind of takes some of the water stuff a step further, and I think the technology in terms of the beast is very good. And I really enjoy the color. There's a lot of bright colors in this. There's dark colors when there needs to be. It's not one of your more modern Hollywood animations or movies that seem to be perpetually dark. So I really like that. There's really two main characters. There's the black girl you saw in the beginning, and there's this guy.
Far beyond the horizon.
That you saw walking there. He's kind of taping up his hand. And he is a good character, really. You know, he's kind of your standard monster hunting hero. He's really gung-ho, loves what he does, out to kill all the monsters that he can. And but he stands by the traditions and the code of these monster hunters, and you know how people should live their life in a good way. And you know, so he's got morality, he's got a core philosophy that is morally good, and you know, he believes too in what he's doing. The black girl, I actually forget her name off the top of my head. I'm kind of going to try to avoid names, too, just as part of not going into the spoilers. But she's not bad. You know, you kind of, from this trailer and some of the pictures and stuff, she kind of looks like she might be an obnoxious Mary Sue. You know, always knows what's right, always knows, you know, the hero is in the wrong, and she's out to correct everything. And now there is an element of the hero is in the wrong, but it's more of the hero didn't know, and she doesn't know either. It's something they find out later. And you know, I said I'd be as spoiler free as I can, so I don't want to go any farther than that. The world building in this is very good, especially for what is I think it's about a 2-hour movie. You really get a sense of these guys have been hunting monsters for so long. They have specialized ships. You know, if you look at this ship, it's not built like a traditional ship in our world. First of all, it's got two huge masts. right here. It's got sails over here. And at one point in the show, you find out that there's actually more sails that unfold, and they fold down to the side to give the ship a lot more speed, and it can be a really fast ship. And then you have here this plank that runs the length of the ship on the side. It's on the other side as well, and all these guys are able to tie off onto hooks and hang out with spears, and they try to spear the monster. And, that's obviously not something you would find in a traditional ship. So these guys have been fighting monsters for a long time, and they've built their ships to reflect that. They're fast, they're agile, they have specialized hunting equipment on them. You'll notice there are no visible cannons sticking out of the side. There are cannons, but they're all portable. They're all movable. They can all rotate. They get placed, there's a smaller like hand cannon type cannon that gets placed up on the rails up here, and they're able to move them around. And that actually comes into play later because somebody makes a ship that's supposed to be like the ultimate monster hunter, right? And it looks exactly like a ship from the Age of Sail, but with like absurd amounts of cannons. But they're all just placed in the hull like you would expect from a traditional ship of the line. And the first thing the captain of the ship here, Captain Crow, says is he's like, "No, you're never gonna kill a monster with that thing. It rides too high. It's got too many fixed cannons. The fixed cannons aren't gonna be any good." He just tears it apart, and is like, no. It's such a great moment to me because not only does it reflect the world building very well and the captain's experience, it also reflects, the people in charge has got no experience with any of this stuff. They're just living off of the glory and fame, essentially, of the monster hunters.
Up against nature's darkest design, and I'm joining your crew.
Oh no, you ain't.
Hey, put me down! Let me go!
So this is kind of indicative of the relationship these two have, at least early on. And the thing I really like about the way these two characters interact is there's a lot of moments where you're like, oh, this could go agenda real fast, right? But it doesn't. Women are a part of these crews. It's a clearly fantasy setting, so that doesn't really matter. It's not. There's no point made of it. There's no like, oh, in a lot of stuff now, you'd have the moment of her being like, well, you just don't want me on there because I'm a black girl, and there's the first mate is a black woman. It's not made a point of at all. It's just shown as natural to this world. Kind of like when they did that stuff in the Star Trek, the original series, when they had Uhura on the bridge, when they eventually had Chekhov and Sulu. It wasn't a point that they made. It was just there, and everybody in the setting treated it as completely normal. And that's exactly the way it works here, which I think is great, because okay, you're a fantasy setting. In this fantasy setting, there's more equality in this time period than there was in ours. That's fine. There's women doing more dangerous things than they would have been in our time. Fine, because it's a fantasy setting. And it's a fantasy setting that makes it obvious that that's kind of the way things have always been, out of necessity, if nothing else, and makes no point of it. It doesn't try to hit you in the head with something. It's just, this is the setting. These people all interact naturally. There's no mention at all of gender, of skin tone, of any of that stuff. It's just, this is the world. And this girl has hero worship in the beginning of this guy and of the captain and the ship in general, everybody on the ship. And it's kind of nice because she comes into it with hero worship instead of what you get a lot of times of like, they don't respect the heroes of the previous generation at all, right? And look down on them and like, you guys can't do anything right. We gotta come in and fix it. She doesn't come in to fix anything. She just wants to be on a ship doing monster hunting stuff because that's what her parents did. So there's a lot of moments where you're like, oh, this could get real bad, and then it doesn't. And I really enjoy that because it could easily go out of its way, because, you know, you're thinking Netflix, right? Could easily go out of its way, but the guy that made this made Moana and Big Hero 6, and I have said it before on this channel, I think Moana is the last great Disney movie. Everything that has come after it has been varying levels of not anywhere near as good. And, you know, Big Hero 6 is very popular. I've never seen it. So you know he's got the capability, and in his past endeavors, he hasn't put agenda stuff in it either. And then, of course, you have the monsters. And everything in this movie is a character. You've got the characters, of course, the ship itself is a character. The cities, you know, look at this city. This is just beautiful. And then it really drives home, this is a fantasy setting, right? You've got these long bridges and walkways and buildings built on top of the sea with huge seawalls and defensive structures. Then you've got long bridges connecting to the land. That's just really, really cool visual. It's a really good way of getting home. This is a fantasy setting. This is not our traditional what have you, you know. And the ship is a character. Look at the front of the ship. That is just awesome. You know, you've got a bit of Captain Ahab going on as part of the story, which is played very, very well because it doesn't overshadow the whole thing. It actually merges really well with the eventual plot.
Yeah.
There's a ship. There's a ship.
We're dropping you
can
off
see
at
how
the
fast it moves, how quickly it plows through the water and it turns. You know, this ship is made to chase fast monsters in the water. And everything about its animation, about its structure, about its character is built to show that, rather than having some sort of long exposition about it. A great job. And then the monster, you know, here's the water again, okay? Really good visuals, but the monsters are what really, to me,
But you joined the
makes
ship
this
when
movie
you were my age.
stand out. You know, the visuals on the monsters, look at the detail of the scarring patterns on this monster. It's just great. And then, you know, you gotta have the cute, right? Because it's a kid's movie.
monsters. Monsters that want to eat us. We're not keeping it.
But he's...
And again, you see that and you go, well, that could be really annoying for the rest of the movie. It's really not. There's large parts of the movie where it just kind of disappears. And when it shows up and does something important and useful. You know, sometimes it's rolling around in the background being silly, but it's not like a silly comical character that they focus on, right? It's their sidekick, it's their pet dog, basically. And it shows up when it needs to and does things that are helpful for the characters and as part of the plot. It doesn't... The movie doesn't spend a lot of time making it this obnoxious sidekick pet.
He's so cute!
Even though it kind of introduces it that way, right? Really enjoyed the heck out of the first two-thirds of this movie. It's the third act where it kind of breaks down. And it kind of goes this Disney route. And you're like, oh. And it's this Disney route of... And you can go to Wonder Woman 1984 on this too. Where you're expecting a big, huge showdown. And people just talk and leave. That was a big letdown. You know, they give the monsters and the main monster in the movie Red a lot of screen time. They give them those big fights at other parts of the movie, and then when you get to the part where you're expecting a final showdown, a climax, not just of dialogue, but of action and story, it just talks and leaves. Literally, they talk and they leave. There's a very brief conflict, and then it's over, and everybody talks, and there's a speech, and there's another speech, and then they leave. And that's where it really falls apart, because I hate that in modern movies. It's really heavily in animated movies, but it's in other stuff too, like Wonder Woman 1984, where you're like, look, this whole movie's promising me a showdown. I want a showdown. I want this climactic fight. This is an action adventure movie. Where's the action adventure in the last 20 minutes? It's not really there. The big final fight that you would expect the plot is driving towards is not there. And we see this over and over again. You see that in Wonder Woman 1984. You don't see it in Moana. There is a final fight. There's a big showdown. And then there's a little bit of talking. But then you see it in Raya, you see it in Encanto, where they even get to the point in Disney where there's no villain. And you're just left, like, underwhelmed. And that's kind of how this movie ends. It's just underwhelming. It's like, okay, you had all that great stuff, including a really nice plot twist. And you don't finish it. You don't drive it home. And they're making a sequel, and I think that's potentially a good thing, because it was kind of one of those, everybody gives a speech, the bad guys get scared and walk off, and then you're told by a voiceover at the end that everything's going great and swimming and, so on and so forth. And that just doesn't feel earned. And he kind of talks about that. The director kind of talks about that in an interview where he says, there's this part at the end of the movie where, like, everything is supposed to be going great. I don't want to get into spoilers. Everything's supposedly going amazing, and I'm not really sure that things would quite work out that way. So I'm glad he saw that. I am interested in seeing a sequel. I do recommend it. Ending's kind of disappointing. It's a letdown, but the rest of it's well worth watching. It's fun. It's a nice adventure. Nothing is explicit. Nothing is, not child friendly, and there's no real agenda. If there's any commentary along those lines, it's almost completely allegorical and subtext, and that's fine. That's a big relief from what we've been getting. So yeah, I recommend The Sea Beast. It's not a perfect movie, but it's got a lot going for it. Make sure you get the animated The Sea Beast, because there's another movie called The Sea Beast from like 1926. Totally different story. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm going to have an update video coming in the next week or so with some cool stuff going on that I'll be announcing. So look forward to that. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Ring the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.